Welcome back to the Marvel Movie Minute, a daily podcast in which we explore the films of the Marvel Cinematic Universe 1 minute at a time. In this, our 5th season, we are looking at Joe Johnston's 2011 film, Captain America, The First Avenger. I'm Andy Nelson from the Next Reel Film Podcast.
And I'm Pete Wright, and if you listen real close like, you can hear the soldiers saying, lens flare, lens flare, lens flare, lens flare.
Oh, Pete and his lens flares. Today we're talking about minute 96, which begins with Cap letting Red Skull know how long he can do this, and it ends with Dum Dum arnimulating the Hydra troopers. That's right. I did that.
And you give me trouble.
Yeah. Joining us on the show this week, we have Nate Bubbawheat Withrow from the superhero movie blog Flights, Tights, and Movie Nights and the Time Loop podcast. It's time to rewind. Hello, Nate.
Yay!
Hey, it's good to be back.
Good to have you back in a very action-filled week. We are kind of right at the peak of all of this battle that is happening. And, well, I should say we're getting to the peak. As the minute starts, we're kind of left at this moment where Cap had surrendered himself, or I suppose, he had been captured by the overwhelming horde of Hydra troopers. And here he is in Schmidt's office lab on his knees after Schmidt just dealt him a few blows. And then, of course, he has his I can do this all day. And here we start. So let's just start with the film itself, though, Nate. As far as Captain America goes, are you a fan of this film?
I feel like this is kind of mid-tier Marvel.
Uh-huh.
I don't love it, but I don't hate it. It does what it needs to do. I feel like in watching it again, there's definitely so much that I love. Like it really sets up Chris Evans' Captain America character very well. There's just a few movie making problems and a little bit of story tropes, especially towards the end, that kind of bug me a little bit here and there. But overall, it's fun to watch it. It was good revisiting it. I think it's been a long time since I've watched this.
Had you read the comics? I can't remember if you were a comics person or just a movie fan.
No, I still have never read a single Captain America comic book, but I've seen all, 6 movies?
Yeah, they just keep cranking these things out. Okay, so to that end, then, you're a fan of the kind of the character and stuff, but this film as it stands isn't necessarily your favorite. Which of the Captain America films would you say is your favorite?
Oh, Winter Soldier, definitely.
That seems to be the one often brought up as a favorite. I guess I don't hear many people say Civil War. It seems to be this one or Winter Soldier. Pete, which one is yours?
Oh, Winter Soldier, come on.
Just checking.
Come on.
Checking.
I already know how long he can do this. I want to get to some intrigue and spy stuff.
Oh, that's right. It's the 70s spy material. Absolutely.
That's right.
It's good stuff.
That's right.
What do you think, Nate, as far as the quips and things like I can do this all day? Are you a fan of those sorts of lines that not just Captain America, but a lot of Marvel characters throw around?
Yeah, I think that they're a lot of fun. They help break the tension. It adds humor. I had just finished watching Black Adam just 2 days ago, and I thought that felt like it was kind of aping the Marvel formula a bit as well. But it's, I don't think it detracts from the character at all, and I think that they do a decent job of still giving each superhero their own personality and their own sense of humor, even though they all have their moments where they have the quips.
They all sure do that. We even get quips this week from Colonel Phillips, so it is
quips this week, though. And here's the variation on this particular question. We already know that Steve can do this all day, vis-a-vis getting beat up in an alley. And now he's getting beat up again, this time in the Hydra base. It does the callback work. I can do this all day. And maybe it's because we've been talking about this movie for so many weeks and making the joke about I can do this all day that it feels like we've been doing this for about 10 years. But I just wonder, is the callback of the quip as effective as if he just said it the one time? Do we need small Steve to have said it already?
I feel like it works because this is really the first time that he's come up with somebody that's an equal level threat. Because through the rest of the movie, after the super soldier serum, he's just been taking on all the Hydra goons and henchmen. And at this time, he's actually coming up against someone who can get some licks in. And so, yeah, I think it's the perfect time to call this back.
It actually works well that they haven't done it before. Like it would have watered it down quite a bit if they had thrown it in there. Like when we were joking when he was getting the super soldier serum and he calls out to Dr. Erskine, I can do this. And we thought it'd be funny if he said, I can do this all day. But of course it would have ruined the power that it would have had at this particular point, because this is the perfect way to build that callback. What we have here, though, we've got, Steve gives the great line, and then I love that Red Skull is right there with his reply, which I think is great. Oh, of course you can. But unfortunately, I'm on a tight schedule. It's
a tight schedule.
A tight schedule, right. Thank you for correcting me. What do you think of Red Skull? Are you a fan of the way that Red Skull's portrayed in the film?
Yeah, I think he looks fantastic. And from the initial introduction with him and just kind of seeing the kind of tears at his face at the edge of his mask. And as the movie goes on, you get different bits here and there until you get the full reveal. And I think it does look great. It has, the pronounced cheekbones and the missing nose and just this bright comic book red.
Yeah.
Here's a question. Is this Schmidt's quip moment? Like, you always see Cap's line on t-shirts and stuff. I could do this all day. Should we have a Schmidt shirt that says I'm on a tight schedule?
That'd be great.
This might be our big chance to do something in merch.
But it needs to start with 60% more. I am on a tight schedule.
Noted.
Yes. Well, I'm glad that they landed on this look, because if you look at any of the designs that they had played around with when they were first working on the concept, I mean, some of them were absolutely terrifying, like straight out of a Hellraiser film, where it's like, a flayed face basically with just the raw muscles exposed. And I think that it would have, while in concept, sure, it could have looked like the super soldier serum really didn't work and it basically ate the skin off his face. But in context of kind of a comic book film that's appealing to a 4-quadrant audience, I think that you would have had a lot more complaints. And so I think that they did land on something that actually feels, while it doesn't necessarily make sense why he ended up this way, it looks really cool.
Mm-hmm. I love that you just dropped ComScore language. Who talks like that 4-quadrant audience?
I know.
Screw that. I want Red Rat from the other movie. Where can we bring that back?
That was one of the best things ever. That Red Rat. Have you seen that the 1990 Captain America?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. So you know what we're talking about.
Yeah.
There you go.
Oh, all right. So the moment shifts here because the attention is drawn after Red Skull. He pulls out his gun. Again, he's using his little Hydra pistol that's full of Tesseract energy. So if you were looking closely, you could see the blue glow on his hip. And as he pulls it out, getting ready to blast Captain America, you hear a thunk, 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 and we see some ziplines sticking into the wall just outside of his large windows. And you see 3 people coming down the ziplines. It turns out that it is, in fact, Falsworth, Jones, and Dum Dum. They crash through the window, and now we have the invasion officially starting. My question for the two of you is, why didn't they just do this from the beginning? Is there a reason that they had this whole ruse with Captain America kind of sneaking in here? Like, wouldn't it have been easier if they just kind of all came in through the window?
Like all at the same time, you mean? Like, what was he trying to draw attention
Or it
from?
could have been like the Blues Brothers, where you had a whole bunch of them hutting down the side of the rock face and then coming in from directly over the windows. Like, there are so many questions I have. I'm like, well, why this whole thing with Captain America? Like, I'm legitimately wondering, like, why did they do it this way?
Well, I mean, of course, the real reason is the narrative tease, but
Sure.
I think aside from that, it's the distraction. And, Cap comes in and then he has a large number of guards focused on him rather than any potential invading forces.
So you think that it was probably like to lower Red Skull's guard a little bit? I mean, he talks about, in last week's minutes, how arrogant Captain America was to think that he could come in here and take them all down by himself. And so, yeah, I mean, maybe to your point that they've kind of loosened their watch a little bit because of this.
And always before, he's always come in with just a small group with him. He hasn't brought in a large invading force as far as I can remember. It's just him and the Howling Commandos and maybe just a few other soldiers with him.
And it really is a pretty simple confidence twist, right? That it's Schmidt who says, "Oh, you're so arrogant," when in fact it's Schmidt whose arrogance is getting him in a position to be surprised. From the narrative perspective, I can kind of see how that's a little bit of the low-hanging fruit for the evildoer to be put in this position.
Well, but do we buy it? Because, I mean, as you just pointed out, Nate, like every time that they have attacked another of these Hydra bases, it's always been Captain America and the Howling Commandos, or the Invaders, as sometimes they're called in the script, but whatever. It's the point of, it's a group of this team that has always been doing this stuff. And it almost makes me wonder if it would have made more sense if Red Skull said, where's the rest of your group? You're always traveling together. So I don't know. Now I don't know. It's one of these things that does, I mean, it starts feeling very written because of these little moments.
Well, yeah, I mean, it starts feeling very written also because it's very written. And that's like, at this point, I guess I'm not expecting that much more. At this point in the movie, it happens fast, and what I'm really in for is how cool the zipline trick is to get these three into the base, and how many more, what kind of an action sequence dust up is it? So it doesn't actually give me a lot of time to think about whether or not I trust Schmidt's arrogance being twisted, because the Colonel's here very soon, and I like the Colonel.
Yeah.
Colonel gets his hands dirty.
Well, yeah, I mean, everybody gets to jump in. And so I guess to that end, it works. It just, I end up questioning way too much about, like, why are they doing it this way? It seems like a strange way to start the attack. But it's a Captain America movie. We need to have our hero doing heroic things. And that's the nature of the beast, I suppose.
And making the villain look dumb.
And making
right?
the villain
Those are the
look
two
dumb.
Constituent elements.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think that some people would argue, including myself, that you don't necessarily want your villain to look dumb. And perhaps that's one of the issues with this particular villain in this particular film, is that, for this mustache twirling villain, sometimes he's a little too mustache twirling. And it would be nice if it seemed like he had a little more forethought with his plans.
Andy, I think that's a really interesting observation, because we've talked in this season before about where the movie takes its more modern nods and where it takes its more period nods, right? That in many cases, this movie kind of takes the tone of a period film, but a movie that was made in the period. And mustache twirling villains, were a little bit more mustache. I can't say those words again. Don't ever use those words around me again. Mustache twirling at the time. And so maybe this is one of those, you'll never get me, Captain, kind of a sequence, because that's a Joe Johnston thing. Like, he just likes it.
Now I want to see Edward G. Robinson as Red Skull.
Yeah, as Red Skull. God, that would be great.
Come and get me, Kappa!
You'll never get me, Captain.
Yeah. There's an interesting point there about kind of the nature of that. And yeah, I can see that. Maybe.
Doesn't it? It feels vintage, right?
Well, I mean, your point is interesting because, it is taking place during a time when it was a war with a very clear villain. And before, wars got, more complex, as if, that really is a thing. But, that was kind of the general gist of World War II is, all the good guys and a very clear bad guy. And to that end, that could have been some of the the nature of what Johnston and team were trying to do here. So I can buy that.
Yeah, you can't get much more clear than a guy with a giant red skull for a head.
Truth.
Very true. Absolutely. Okay, so now we're at this point. The three Howling Commandos are coming in through the window, and Schmidt turns and uses his pistol to fire at Steve, who grabs a Hydra trooper and uses him as a shield. My first question is like, what happened to his shield? And then I was like, I had to go back to the last minute and go, oh, there's a guy in the back who's holding his shield, and somehow I just never noticed that when we were talking about that particular minute. But yeah, there's a Hydra trooper holding his shield back in the shadows. And, I don't know if you heard our conversation, Nate, when we were talking about the 3 SS officers who Schmidt disintegrates with the Tesseract gun, but the one leaves marks on the door. And so now I wonder, does Steve have rotor marks on the front of his suit?
Yeah, I don't know. It's like, I was actually thinking about that watching it again this time later on, because these guns are made with the energy from the Tesseract, which we eventually find out is the Space Stone.
Yeah.
It ends up, transporting Schmidt to the planet where the Soul Stone is. Do you think that instead of actually being disintegrated, they're actually being teleported off into deep space?
I've thought about that, because there is a point toward the end of the film when Red Skull's holding it, where it kind of opens up the heavens and you can see kind of space with it. And it was making me wonder. I'm like, yeah, I wonder if these people, if their bodies are just basically getting dumped in the middle of nowhere, floating around in space, and they're all just dying. And but I don't know how that would explain why he ends up on Vormir, but I think that it's a very possible idea. I don't know if they had. I don't know. I always wonder, like, how far in advance had Feige come up with like what this was going to be as he was putting this particular film together. I just don't know, because at this point it still is kind of the cosmic cube as it looks in the comics. So I'm not really sure.
Well, I feel like we often give the Feige a lot more credit early on than maybe is deserved. There's still some things in phase 1 that are a little bit improvisational.
Yeah.
And so, I have no doubt that everything is very well orchestrated at this point, but, today as we're recording this, but, I think there are still some things that they're guessing about at this point.
Yeah. Well, it is an interesting theory, though, and I don't know what's more horrific, being shot by Tesseract energy and instantly disintegrated, or being teleported by Tesseract energy into somewhere in deep space where you promptly die of atmospheric exposure. I don't know. I kind of feel like disintegration. I don't know. I'm not sure how painful disintegration is. I guess that's something to think about.
It's fast, luckily. So if it's painful, at least it's over quickly.
Yeah.
Oh, geez. No matter what, it sucks. Stop it. All right. Well, so Jones lands on the desk. It's funny, when Jones comes through, he's the one in the middle. And when you see them coming through, you see Dum Dum and Falsworth on either side. They're coming through as if, imagine you're on a line, a zip line. You're swinging down, you're holding on to this thing, your feet are hanging down. And when Falsworth and Dum Dum crash through the glass, it kind of makes sense, because it's like they swing up and they come through feet first and kind of shoot through and land on their feet. I don't know what Jones did. It's like he jumped off of his thing, because he kind of comes through like vertically with his hands out in front of him, as if he's kind of like trying to fly through it. I'm not exactly sure what happens, and it's all so quick. But it was such a strange thing as I was like kind of scrubbing through this thing. I'm like, why does he come through hands first and everyone else is coming through feet first?
Yeah, it's almost like he lets go of the zip line so early that his body is in a position to cannonball in? Like, right. What is he expecting to do?
I wasn't focused on the people. I got distracted by the stuff on the desk.
Oh, okay. What did you see there?
That they kicked off? What was on the desk?
Yeah, I could see, there's a stack of books with two I'm pretty sure they're German Shepherd bookends on either side of the books. And there's on the right side of the desk, there is a block, and I'm pretty sure it's got a Hydra logo on the top of it. And, you can't see it because it's mostly in silhouette. But I'd like to think that it's like an Employee of the Month Hydra award.
And Schmidt just gets it every month.
Exactly. Because it does look like that. It's just like a block of wood with the little, like the
logo,
the hood ornament Hydra logo.
Right.
You did it! Congratulations to Schmidt.
That's so funny. I'm trying to remember. I know we talked about his desk earlier in the film. We thought that those bookends might be wolves, like that Odin, had some wolves, and we thought maybe that's what they were. But it's so hard to tell. That German Shepherds would make a lot of sense too.
Yeah, I didn't spend a ton of time, but I feel like their profile fits with the look of a German Shepherd.
Yeah,
for sure.
The other thing, I'm trying to remember if that was actually something that we saw earlier, because I'm trying to remember if he called somebody with that. I can't remember though, but anyway, it's fantastic. I love that he has that on his desk, and now I think we're just going to erase whatever we said in the previous episode, because we're just going to call it Schmidt's Employee of the Month Award.
It's so good.
Once again, you have honored me with this. Thank you all.
I am so proud.
All right. So, we have these 3 Howling Commandos bursting in and doing their stuff. They all raise their weapons and start firing. And you see right in the center, the guard who is holding Captain America's shield doesn't use it. It's like he's not really sure what to do. And I think it's really funny that, he decides, I'm going to put the shield to my side and raise my gun to shoot at you instead of hiding behind the shield, which would have made more sense. Sometimes
stuff is just overwhelming.
Yeah.
There's too much signal. You don't know what to do with stuff.
I think that, yeah. And I like that in the back, if you look carefully, you can see Captain America fighting some of the Hydra troops back there. Now, the one thing that's missing from this shot, though, is Red Skull. And it's funny because when he sees the 3 come through the window, he kind of turns tail and scoots out of the room. But he goes out. Later, when we see him coming through the door, it is the door that is behind Steve as he's fighting. But we don't see Red Skull anywhere in there. That's one of those little production gaffes that seems like it could have been better choreographed. But yeah, he makes his way through the door and runs down the hall. And just like, what's his name in Princess Bride? Count Rugen? Is that his name?
Yeah.
The 6-fingered man.
That's very much where my brain went when he sees them all come in and he just turns tail and runs. But that really this is really the point where we are now officially, as the Howling Commandos burst through the window and Steve starts fighting all these guards, and Red Skull is fleeing. This is really the point in the film where things are shifting, and we're now entering our final action sequence. And it really feels that way. It feels like, okay, things are shifting here. Steve had a plan, and obviously it's, everything's in play now. And I love how Falsworth kind of picks the shield up and tosses it to Steve, and Steve runs out. We're slowly trying to kind of narrow things down. So it's Steve and Red Skull battling each other, and everyone else can kind of do their militaristic fighting and stuff. And so we've got these 3, and then down, I don't know. I'm really confused about the scope of this. How high up do you think that this lab is?
Like physically? In the mountain?
Yeah, when we see it on the mountain face, it seems like it's close to the top, right?
Yeah, on the mountainside, on the cliffside, it seems like it's very close to the top. It's a lair. There is no doubt it's a lair. So how are they in the woods getting to this thing so quickly?
Well, we know that's
more hallways. That is always my question. We are losing a lot of hallway and
not
probably
hallways,
a lot of elevators and stairs. Yeah. This is a real problem.
Well,
it's built as a giant spiral.
It's like
so everything's on a slight incline. It's handicapped accessible.
Well, and for Schmidt to get out, there's probably a slide of some sort, and into a giant tub of Hydra branded balls.
Well, it has to be big enough for the Schmidt mobile.
Yeah.
That's the question, right?
That's the biggest
absolutely
problem.
the question. Yeah, okay. So, because I have issues here, because we see out the window. Granted, the Howling Commandos burst through the window. They're dressed like they were when they were on the mountainside earlier, not for winter. And outside the window, it's very cold. It looks snowy and icy on the tops of these mountains, but they don't have gloves on. They're tough. That's how tough they are. They don't need gloves when they're out. But maybe it's an Austrian spring, and it's just snowy on the tops of the mountains because at the bottom, it is lush forest green. I'm a little perplexed by this. This is February in Austria, and somehow it is lush green down at the base. Because when we get outside, after we see Morita and Dernier kind of blast their way in, we cut outside. And so the base of this, where Steve came in with his motorcycle, I'm assuming is at the foot of the mountain. And then the mountain itself is however many feet up above that. Here's a question. A typical mountain from the base of the ground, where it is, not from sea level, but from like if you're in Denver, which is the mile-high city.
So I grew up in Colorado Springs, which is about 6,000 feet. And the big mountain of note is Pikes Peak, and that's 14,000 feet, just over 14,000.
Okay, so let's pretend that this is Colorado Springs, that they're invading.
Okay, let's begin.
Okay?
Yes, this is a great thought experiment. Should I close my eyes? Do you want some meditative music?
So 6,000 feet. So that means they have 8,000 feet of mountain that is in front of them, right?
That's a lot. That's actually a lot of mountain.
It's a lot of mountain. Well, let's just say, okay, maybe it's a shorter mountain. Let's say it's 5,000 feet.
But they're in the Alps. The Alps is not known for shorter mountains.
Well, knowing Schmidt, he went for the biggest mountain because it's always more.
You know, those legendary micro mountains of the Alps.
Okay, but say his lair is what, like 4,000 feet up? It seems pretty high. And then where is the Valkyrie landing strip inside this mountain? Where is it lower than I guess it would be lower than his base.
But it wouldn't be that much lower.
No, it's like 3,500
because
feet.
it needs altitude. So, okay. The Monte Rosa Massif, I don't even remember where we found the location where it would have been early in the season. But what I know is elevation for Monte Rosa Massif in the Alps at Great St. Bernard Pass is 15,781 feet. Mont Blanc and Piz Bernina are 15,780 and 13,284 feet, respectively. And Mount Rosa, 15,203. So let's say they're at 14,000 feet.
But what's the city like right at the base of the mountain? That's the question. Because that's where everybody is at the bottom here.
Yeah, and I'm saying that over the course of not even minutes, but measured in cuts in this movie, the colonel and a team get into and up to many thousands of feet. I have to say, it's got to be at least 3,000 or 5,000 feet.
I think we lose a lot. I think they cut out all of the elevator time. I think if you really watch this action scene play out in real time, it takes hours because everybody gets into an elevator and then they have to wait 20 minutes for it to get to the other end of the mountain.
No, see, it's a giant spiral with a people mover.
Okay, let's just say graciously the people mover can move 60 people at a time. There's a whole platoon.
Well, anyway, what we see happening here is we have the Allies, and that includes Dernier and Morita coming in at the bottom of the mountain. They blow their way in. I assume they're at the bottom mountain. We actually have no idea where they are, but they're exploding their way through a door. So my guess is that they came in from the bottom. That doesn't make a ton of sense, actually, now that I think about it, though, because Tommy Lee Jones, Colonel Phillips, he gets the word from them with Peggy Carter and the rest of the Allies that they're in. So now they invade from the bottom. So I have no idea where Dernier and Morita came in. Suddenly, none of this makes any sense.
Well, right, because you mean where they were swinging
Did they bore their way through the mountain?
They bored their way through the mountain.
Well, they didn't swing in. This is, again, my question to like the train sequence earlier. Why did only 3 come on the zip lines? It's like they only know how to send 3 people on a zip line at a time. These Howling Commandos need to learn how to put more people on a zipline.
That is it. Yep. Oh,
my
this
goodness.
may be, in the legacy of the Marvel Movie Minute, the most important episode we've ever done. Challenging the continuity of the Alps in Captain America.
I've never been to have either of you ever been to the Alps?
No, I've never left the country.
Yeah, there's nothing to see. You're not missing much.
Jeez. The base of it looks awfully like the countryside outside of London, which I think is it's beautiful this time of year. I don't know. It's the continuity with this mountain is going to plague me because it is so lush green, and I get it. It's a production schedule; they have to work within the production schedule, and yada yada yada, all that good stuff. But the mountains are snowy, and it is so green at the bottom that sometimes it gets a little confusing.
That's funny.
Anyway, what else do we have to say about this minute?
Is there any more? I mean, haven't we solved it?
If anything, we've gotten more confused. We see a lot of the Tesseract blasts. I do like that it feels like, this is a war with multiple types of weapons as the allies run in. You see a lot of people with bullets, but then you see a lot of these Hydra troopers with the Tesseract weapons. And that's so, it makes for an interesting war scene. It feels like World War II with aliens is kind of what it feels like.
Well, yeah, and of course, I have to complain even more and get subversive joy out of how much lens flare we have in the troop running, because I can't see this and not see a comedy, because all the little lens flare blades are marching down. Lens flare. Like, it's really fun. I don't know why I am an island and think all of this lens flare from the blue goo in the guns is as funny as it is, but I cannot. It takes me right out of the movie. It really does.
Yeah, I've always referred to them as blue splody guns.
The blue splody guns. Yeah, that's a new term of art. I think we can really lean in on that.
And I definitely remember not liking them the first time I watched it, because I felt like it was really a PG-13 crutch. It's like to have these blue splody guns that evaporate them instead of a bunch of dead bodies, and
right,
which is weird because they still have people using real guns, and they still have the bloodless dead bodies, and a surprisingly amount of bloody moments throughout the film.
Yeah, that's actually an interesting point, because if the goal of Schmidt is to use this Tesseract to create weapons that are more powerful and more destructive, that he can essentially take over the entire world with, which is what his goal is, does it feel like we're not getting that when we actually see a war scene with the weapons used, where it feels like, oh, it's just another gun, and it's just another war with soldiers killing each other on both sides?
Wait a minute. Are you making a comment on the fact that when the guns are used, the bodies disappear?
Well, no. Well, I'm making a comment on the fact that, are they any more powerful than a real gun? If Schmidt's goal is to create weapons that are more powerful and can give him world control, are we seeing that in what's demonstrated here? I mean, it's, kind of a grotesque, conversation, but a dead body from a bullet, it's going to be as comparable as a body that's been evaporated by a Tesseract weapon. You have no one there to shoot at you anymore.
You get a bit more armor piercing potentially with the Tesseract weapons. But yeah, and at least as we see in this movie, it's still, one shot per person. It's not like they can do a spray and take out a whole platoon in one go.
That's true. There is no spray of the blue splody munition, which is problematic. It feels like as soon as the blue goo hits a guy, that guy disappears and the blue goo stops.
Yeah.
Like it just stops working. There is no blowback. There's no, I get that. That's unfortunate byproduct of must be a poorly designed space weapon.
Well, to that end, it just feels like if that were Schmidt's goal, he's not succeeding with it. I mean, maybe he would with the bombs that he is planning on dropping over the cities. And maybe those are the big blue splodies that would actually really destroy an entire city's worth of things. But again, that's kind of like a nuclear weapon. Like, there are so many things suddenly as I'm thinking about this that it's like, you're just another army with weapons. Like, nothing about this says, oh, I can control the world because I have this blue box.
Yeah. And we can't have a weapon that powerful. Otherwise, the movies, the balance of the movie is like there aren't enough superheroes for that level of weapon. We need to wait until we get some more unity for that level of weapon.
And it's not like they can make the weapons any faster because they still just have it's still coming from just one source. And while the source may be limitless, but it's still, they can only draw so much from it at a time.
And 60% new, 60% more. That's important.
Yeah, it's an interesting plan that Schmidt has. I guess we'll just leave it at that. As a warmonger, and he is out there mongering his war.
And yeah, he needs to be this level of baddie, and that's enough for Cap at this point. And I'm okay with it.
Yeah. All right. Well, the minute ends as we get, I don't know what happened to Gabe Jones, but now we have Dum Dum, Falsworth, and Dernier rounding the corner. I also don't know what happened to Morita, but the two of them suddenly have disappeared. And now it's these three coming around the corner, and Dum Dum is now wielding the Arnimulation weapon, and he is blasting at the Hydra troopers. And that's where the minute ends. We can talk more about the Howling Commandos and all that next time. But, as it stands, any last thoughts on this minute?
One line, I think the you might need this is not quite a get this man a shield, but it's not too bad.
Well, he seems to do okay with just a Hydra trooper in front of him, too. He can just grab one of them. All right. Well, Nate, tell everybody about what you're up to and where people can find more of you out there on the interwebs.
Sure. I'll start out with, my longest running site is flightstights.movienights.com. That's where I have written reviews of over 500 superhero movies. I've slowed down on it quite a bit, but I still try to get written reviews of the new movies as they come out. As we're recording this, I am just about to write something for Werewolf by Night and Black Adam. But I don't write on there as much as I used to. And, everything that I'm doing, you can find me on Twitter where I'm at Bubbawheat.
Bubbawheat, fantastic. All right, well, we will be back tomorrow to talk about Minute 97. So, Nate, thanks again.
Thank you.
And Pete, we'll talk to you next time.
I'm Pete Wright, elevation 239 feet.
Is that really your elevation?
Yeah, right now.
Like little baby elevation. Until next time, true believers.
Marvel Movie Minute is a production of True Story FM. Engineering by Andy Nelson. This season's music is Spread the News by Anthony Vega, and this season's show art is by Winston Yabo. Find the show at truestory.fm, and if your podcast app allows ratings and reviews, consider doing that for this show.